is it the role, the written role that makes a part, or the actor who's playing it? Is the question.
Age-old question.
It's about 100 years old question. Yes.
I would say Shakespeare was dealing with that question.
Yes. Yeah.
He would make plays about more women if he had more women players.
If it had more women, or if they were allowed. It's not that he didn't have them; they weren't allowed to be. The women were not allowed on the stage at the time.
Yeah, but he made some plays that had a lot of women in it. Some of the comedies, and he had boy-girl players, so he would have had to have lots of boy-girl players.
Yeah, he had boy-girl players, and he had old character players who would play older women. Mm-hmm. But like a mature woman, he didn't have somebody for that, like mothers and stuff like that. He didn't have good players for that. So yes, I think that he wrote his parts to be fitted to boy-girl players and comedy players who played women as well. So I think that's what a writer should do. He should at least write, if he's going to write for something, he should write to what's available. So I think that's of necessity is a choice, but it's sometimes people do write stuff. I think most people who do write for what's available if that's an issue. But if you say I'm going to make something about Julius Caesar, and you have no male player of the right age, you still can't change that. It needs to be a male, so you have to fake it because even though you don't have it. Then I did watch a Japanese all-female cast group put on a play about Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar was of course female.
Yeah.
But playing male.
Very well done. Yeah.
But the question is, if the writer is not so good, can an actor, can the right casting save it?
I think casting should do a lot, because they always talk about doing the right casting. They always look, we saw 600 people for this part, blah 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 blah. And then very often I find that they say, well, and then this from this strange angle, this person came to us through this and this means, and we just realized it's her. You got Scarlet O'Hara, similar story.
And the Scarlet O'Hara character, the old one, was already a written character and was not written in the book for any availability of actors. So they had the role and they had to cast it, and they tried to find somebody. They actually found a British actress, not at all somebody from the American South.
Yeah. And then we have to ask, in all of the American South, which I would imagine to be,
not small.
50 to 100 million people, they can't find one actress that can pull off Scarlet O'Hara?
She also has to be a good actress, because I think especially the role of Scarlet O'Hara, she's not very nice. If you look at it,
I know
she's not nice at all, and
she
has to be interesting enough to the audience to carry the entire 4 hours of movie. Yeah. And if she's not absolutely riveting to look at, not just in prettiness, but actual movement and everything. That wouldn't work if you get anybody who's not good enough. I do know they actually were considering Bette Davis at the time, but she had already done something similar, and so they sort of went, maybe we shouldn't, because it goes into competition with the other thing.
Yep.
There was a film called Jezebel, which she did, which is something not dissimilar, and But you need somebody as good as Bette Davis, but somebody who never who wasn't there yet. So
there are. It's not just what's it written, but there are certain criteria that you have to hit. Because one thing comes to mind: the casting of I forget the character's name in Shogun, the translator, the Japanese translator woman.
I think she was Miyako, something like that. I'll look it up.
I don't remember her name. So they did an enormous search for a Japanese woman who could do this part, and they went through all Japanese actresses that they were offered by the Japanese casting agencies, and the problem was none of them spoke enough English. They spoke some English that they learned in school, but that wasn't the kind of English that you could actually literally be on.
On international set with
international production and do lots and lots of English lines. So they went through and they found nobody, and they were very close to having start shooting. When they heard this was in the specials on the DVD, so you can check this all out. And they heard somebody speak. They heard a female voice speaking behind them on set. Possibly this woman was there to bring the coffee. I don't know what she was doing there. And they stopped and they said, "Those are actually passable English words," because this was the problem. And they said, "Okay, we are not turning around," and they said some really rude things about, she should at least look good, and they said it very rudely. It was the 70s. We will not repeat that here. But if it doesn't like absolutely bomb in the looks department, she's hired.
She's Japanese. She's not going to bomb in the looks department.
No, she was gorgeous. And that's who we got. And then they had the problem that, so the biggest requirement was that she had to be authentically Japanese, and she had to speak enough English to say the lines, not understand the lines. So there is a lot you can work with, because you're talking film, you're talking television, you can take shots, you can do there's been many films in which people have spoken lines they don't know the language of. Yeah,
and she doesn't have to sell anything other than being Japanese. Yeah. A female Japanese, that's all she needs to sell for. Yeah. Because like a role for Scarlet O'Hara, the actress actually has to sell this very not nice person as a person that's interesting to watch. Whereas this lady...
Exactly. It's the criteria. Which criteria are the most important, are essential for this job, for this part. And you fulfill that first.
Yeah. And... and then the hard work, and I mean not discrediting her work because she did a lot, because she was not an actress. The hard work. She
might have been. I don't know.
Well, was not a famous actress. Otherwise, we know about it.
She was not in the casting sessions.
Exactly. So the hard work is actually done by the co-actors and the director to make sure that she can do what she was hired to do. Yes. And I know that Richard Chamberlain plays the Anjin-san. and basically the whole thing is about his culture shock with meeting these Japanese people, and the way he sells it helps her to sell her. Yes. He's so good at it.
Everyone that's in there is doing such an enormously good job, including her.
Yeah. But they make sure that she gets the chance to do it right, because that's another thing, that even if you cast the right people, if your director is not helping, then it still might not work.
Yeah.
So you need to. Everybody needs to be on the same page and work. Remember, it's team sports. Yes,
absolutely team sport. They need to all believe in the product and all help each other be the best they can be. There's a Dutch production that the Dutch will know very well and nobody else will, called the Kleine Waarheid, the Small Truth. We will give some, or here or wherever, we will give some information on it. The main actress am I saying correct? Willeke van Ammeroy?
Willeke Alberti.
Willeke Alberti. Apologies to both ladies. Willeke Alberti, and she was cast in the 70s because she could sing. She was a young woman. She fit the physique of the role that was in the book, and she could sing. Now, the Netherlands does not have 50 to 100 million people to choose from, so it's like if you get somebody approximately right age, right description, and the singing bit is actually there, because that's a lot harder to teach somebody.
You can't fake that.
Can't fake that. So that was more important than whether or not she could act. So you can see in, I don't know how many episodes there are, 50 maybe. You can see in the beginning that she's young. And
she's supposed to be young.
She's supposed to be young, and so she can be still bright-eyed and not very deep in her acting. And then as the time goes on, you can see how she matures. And we were told in the specials, again, that they did an enormous... They did this like plays. Every episode was basically put on like plays with acts, and you could tell by the camera, it's just one camera, and then lots of stuff happens for like 10 minutes.
That was traditional. It wasn't particularly.
The 1970s is completely different than how they do things now. She was taken by all these famous Dutch actors who are in that production, because there's like one big Dutch production every so often on television, and they all trained and they all taught her to act. So you learn on the job, and boy does it pay off. So again, it's a casting for the right reasons.
Yes, and then helping if for whatever reason the other stuff that was lacking, make up for it. I see sometimes in movies, and these are not famous movies because they failed. It's where they simply get a person to play the lead and just hang him or her out to dry.
Well, yeah, it's so sad.
And that's
so unnecessary.
It is unnecessary, and it doesn't give a good product. The best is mediocre products. Even if your production is wonderful and your music is wonderful and everything else is wonderful, if the core elements are not wonderful, it's mediocre at best.
Yeah.
And just most likely to be just bad.
Yeah. I still feel, because I like the story of the person in the movie. I like to be brought along with their emotional growth and all of that. Is if the main character or some characters around the main character don't fill the screen, don't and you can that's when they lose me. I was going to say. In Star Wars, the original Star Wars, when Harrison Ford does his thing, it fills the screen.
That's his job.
And then you got the two really young kids, Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. They're super young. The first movie, all they need to do is hit the mark, get the line out, be young, run around. Great, excellent. But if you didn't have Han Solo filling that screen, going, and Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness.
Alec Guinness, yes, yeah.
Oh my goodness!
That makes sure.
Yeah. So you can get it from various sides. Where do you get your casting? And that gives the people that don't have the gravitas yet, that gives them time.
Gives them time to grow up, and gives them time to shine. And there was the Man in the Iron Mask movie that had 4 veterans as the 4 musketeers, and Leonardo DiCaprio as the king and Man in the Iron Mask, and on paper, it looked like... Leonardo DiCaprio is good, but he was very young at the time. These older guys could have completely buried him in terms of acting.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah.
They made sure that the actor and the role could shine where they needed to shine. And he was not, I mean, the Man in the Iron Mask was a sympathetic role, but the king was absolutely not a sympathetic role. He was terrible. And they made enough room, and they gave him all the support they needed, even though every single one is a big name. And that's what made the film good, is that they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Had they not done that, that film would have flopped. It doesn't work that way. If you try to shine too much.
Yeah. One movie I feel was cast perfectly, absolute perfection for me, and I know the film flopped. Is YENTL. Nobody can say that Barbra Streisand does not fill the screen. Mandy Patinkin, Amy Irving. You don't even have to talk about anybody else if you've got those three doing the three main roles. And it is mostly literally about those three people.
Yeah.
That you can't screw it up anymore.
Yeah, and then I think that the only reason that it possibly failed is the timing of this movie.
Yeah, it's subject matter
and timing.
Yeah,
because that sort of film, the YENTL especially, is going to be a film people are going to be watching again and again forever. And that's for, I know, for film success, they want people to want a big box office takes, like the first couple of weekends. That's basically where you earn your money, and this is one that earns. It's an evergreen. It's going to earn much money for a long time. It's just that's not what people want in the film industry to call it successful. So I think it is successful. Yeah. It's one that people will still be talking about for a long time.
Yeah, I'll be talking about it.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk about films that are really, really bad, but like Star Wars again, the second set of movies.
I was so close to mentioning that after I mentioned the first one. I thought, I'm not going there.
Because
yes, go there.
Yeah, let's go there. Because I forgot his name, but the guy who plays Anakin Skywalker, the adults version, I don't know if he's a good actor or not, but he does not get a chance in this thing.
No.
And that is not
chance.
on him, that is on the director and possibly on the writer, but the director is the director's job is to actually throw out the writing if it's really too bad, too horrible to use. And so it's basically the director who let this guy down. And and I don't know why
he's not there's nothing, you can't say that he's a bad actor because he's not. He just didn't get a chance to show what he could do.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know if he's a bad actor. We don't know if he's a good actor.
We don't even know.
Yeah.
And that shows how little opportunity that movie gave him.
And some actors are so good enough on their own to fix this kind of problem. I've seen that happen. Lots of British actors especially are very able to take a shitty line and then say the shitty line in such a way that it becomes a valuable line. But that's a talent, and it's actually training. It's training of doing Shakespeare, who wrote lovely lines, but not all of them are very useful sometimes.
And they don't really run off the tongue.
And so they learned to say the line and give it meaning in the mime, basically. And this poor kid had no such training, and so he's hung out to try
lines.
Yeah, but
he didn't have lines where you go, oh, okay, well, yeah.
No. I've seen some actors take really shitty lines of that caliber and fix them.
Me too. I would say Castiel, but I don't know if we're talking television shows.
Sure. Yeah, Castiel, who
about difficult lines, shitty lines that do not run off the tongue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Castiel, the angel in the possibly neurodivergent angel, if such a thing exists. I think we have just decided that such a thing does exist, because he certainly is. He does not act like any of the other angels. He was the first that we met in Supernatural, so you would think that would be like the gold standard, but doesn't seem to be the case. Later they do make a point of it to say that he was the one with the crack in the chassis coming off the line.
Oh, goody.
Which was because I don't
Not very nice to say.
Because I don't understand car metaphors, so that took me a while to think about what they were talking about. But I think what they're trying to say is he's a neurodivergent angel. And possibly that saved the entire universe. It's hard to say. The fact that he was different was the reason that at least God in the thing said that was the reason they were different. But I'm veering off the subject. Anyway, so the lines that Misha Collins, playing Castiel, has to push out of his mouth and make sound like that's what he would normally say,
or any not even can't even say a human being would say, because he's not a human being.
He's not a human being. Yeah.
But even so, they are shitty.
So I'm always in awe of hearing him say the most difficult of lines, and you go, I think he just said something sensible.
Yeah, and it's actually it's easier when the character is supposed to be a good guy, because if the person is supposed to be not a sympathetic guy, and not the bad guy either. That's again Scarlet O'Hara role, but that's so much more difficult than, I mean, Castiel also, but. A role where you play the person who's not obviously sympathizable, sympathetic, you know, and that's where you actually have to get the really good actors in. The roles for for the baddies, they get a lot of people with some serious acting chops for baddies, and I think that is due to two things. I think that playing the baddie is not what most actors want. They want to play the goodies. So, and you have to actually play it and not be it. Because a lot of roles that go around is where somebody is something and then just portray that again. Yeah. Whereas a baddie, you don't want to internalize that. You don't want to be a baddie. You don't want to profile yourself as a baddie and then do it. Or if you do, it's not healthy for you to do that. If they do it for character acting, it's usually a bad idea. Playing a bad guy with character acting, it's very unhealthy. But to get a really good bad guy, you have to get somebody who is willing to, willing and who has the chops to go into it and really...
Yeah, I'm thinking Al Pacino in the Godfather movies, because I find that very interesting. I was almost to the point I might want to do a film review on it, on the first one anyway. The second one is also super interesting. But Al Pacino is the youngest son, and he is a war hero because we're just coming out of Second World War, and he served, and he's, and all these people above him, his older brothers, his father, everyone is clearly, the big bad mob, and it's pretty big and pretty bad. And he kind of floats through that. And that's... Start thinking, okay, so he's kind of a nice guy, he's trying to marry somebody. He never shows his Michael Corleone. He never shows his what he's thinking. So you think at first, it's just he's an all-American boy. Until
oh no.
Until it comes down to somebody shoving a gun in his hand, and he just came off being in the Second World War, so he knows guns. That's without saying. I mean, it's not without saying. Well, it goes without saying in the movie. And he just picks up the gun, and they say, if need be, you might be the only one. I forget the details, so I might get this completely wrong. Write as if it's wrong. I don't care. You might be the only one to do the final shooting off this our nemesis, and you might have to do that. And so it's all set up as if he is like the pampered young man. Well, so he goes and he does everything that's asked of him in cold blood. And then you find out why he was so simple, because he is that cold. He is as cold as a fish. And at the end of the movie, he's like killing people left, right, and center. All these movies end up with like enormous amount of murders being done. They're so totally giving you this little clue away of all of these the Godfather movies. All these murders are being done.
They've been out for a while.
Yeah, so. You've had chance to watch it. The murders are being done by his command, by others, while he's like sitting in his big mansion and staring off into a lake or what. I mean, it's so pernicious. That's a great word. I love it. He is so effing evil. And then you think, oh my God, he was that way when at the very beginning, when he was the all-American apple pie boy. He was like that already, and his daddy knew it. That's why he left it to him and not to the older brothers. I mean, talk about a role. That's a role.
Yeah.
And Al Pacino did it. I don't know if another actor could have. I'm sure another actor could do it.
Well, you have to.
He did it.
you not only have to do the role and do all the nitty gritty of the role. You have to make it interesting for viewers to watch, and how you mesmerize the viewers. That's the secret.
He did it.
And just seeing somebody reach out for such callous criminality, it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
And the story is written like that, but the actor has to actually perform it.
Yeah, because it's not a fast movie. The first one is from, I think, 1972, second one from 1974. This was not fast movie times.
No.
It was one of the first movies where they were actually going to do the mob, because they were off the Hays Code now. So this was like, it burst onto the scene, and that's why it's still epic. But yeah, it's woof.
and
somebody else have done it?
The question is, could somebody else have done it? And probably not. Or if they had cast somebody else, would it have been completely different? Mm-hmm. If they had cast somebody else, he might have interpreted, he and the director, between them might have interpreted the story differently.
Yep.
This is why why it's interesting to watch like a Hamlet play.
Yep.
Because you have the story of Hamlet, and it goes from A to B to C to D, and death. But the way you go through the whole thing with always the same lines, that's interesting. Yeah. How does this particular actor or actress interpret these lines? Especially like the scenes where Ophelia goes crazy. How the progression, because it progresses through the story. Yeah. The way it's progressed is not in any version exactly the same, because there is enough room for the actress and the director to decide when she loses the plot, and that's what acting is. That's why casting a different person, if you cast a young lady or a young gentleman in that role, because you could, or somebody says, oh, I'm going to have an idea of a pagan background or of a highly Catholic background, could all change these things, and the chops of the actress or actor is going to show the value of the work, basically.
Yeah. I'm just remembering an old movie called The Singer, Not the Song.
Yes.
Dirk.
That was a bad movie. It was a good bad movie.
Dirk Bogarde.
Dirk Bogarde.
Yeah. So this was a subtextual homosexual movie. For those who've not seen it, go look it up.
And it's not meant that way, I think. It was meant that way?
Yeah. It's a snooze fest. It's very, very slow. But if you're into, like, what did they do in the olden days to get gays on screen, this is what they do. So the fascinating thing about this movie is point of the movie is that our hero, who is actually a bad guy,
it's set in the West.
it's protagonist,
set in
not
the
a
Old
hero.
West.
Our protagonist is not a hero because he's a bad guy.
He's wearing a black hat, you know that.
He's a black hat, he's in black leather, hello. We don't mind him in black leather. So he falls in accidentally. I think he got shot or whatever, and then he gets nursed back to health. You know, these things, and it's very Florence Nightingale, except that it's by a priest. And the priest nurses him back to health. And then he stays with the priest. Because he's like in love with the priest, but it's subtextual. So he's like,
the priest has no clue.
Priest, you are such a fantastic, wonderful person. Are you so fantastically wonderful because you believe? Please tell me your faith. And that's about like the whole middle of the movie is that. And you're just looking at that thing, going, why in God's name is he in love with this snooze fest guy? The priest, I apologize for anyone related to this actor. It's not warrant that much adoration. He is just not it. He doesn't carry it off. It should have been James Holden or William Holden, or it should have been somebody where you go, aha, because he falls in love with this guy that is more than just priesthood. And so the point of the movie is he so fascinating because, is this priest so fascinating because he is a priest, or is the priest so fascinating because of the man he is? Yeah? That's the singer or the song. And the end of the movie, of course, our formerly now reformed, formerly bad guy has to die because he's gay, and second, he was formerly reformed. So that's what happens in these 1960s or 50s movies. 60s. Yes. They formerly reformed people have to die.
Not formally reformed because they were formerly bad.
That what she said, and. And then in his dying breath, where he's lying on top of or under the priest that he's trying to protect from being killed, he says it was the singer, not the song. And I'm thinking, how could he come to that conclusion? And what really is the point here is that, to me, the casting was wrong.
Yeah,
because
I've seen it too. The casting was wrong.
The casting was wrong. The guy was not that fascinating. And you need somebody who could bring that kind of fascinatingness.
Yeah, and it's not Dirk Bogarde who's the problem.
No, he played it completely as you would want it. He played it like he was in love.
Yeah,
subtextually as much as he could.
Yeah, but you have to get the right guy, and then we come back to Gone with the Wind again.
Yeah, so you can cast incorrectly.
You can cast incorrectly, but especially if it's a person that you need to admire, because in Gone with the Wind, Scarlet admires Ashley Wilkes.
Some women have
and
no
on
taste.
paper, this looks like a wet rag, but in the movie, in the 1939 movie, they cast a guy who could make a wet rag look interesting, or at least interesting enough to understand why Scarlet would be interested.
Him as Leslie Howard as a wet rag, anyone will watch it.
And when they cast the thing,
and they knew it.
They knew it.
He was.
Yeah.
When
they cast it, they didn't have a Scarlet. Scarlet was a problem, but they knew who was going to play Red Butler. It was very clear.
Yeah.
Who was going to play Red Butler was clear, and who was going to play Ashley Wilkes was clear, because Leslie Howard was the only guy who can make
a wet rag look good. Interesting. Yeah. Look enticing. Oh,
and it's not. It wasn't fun for him for a role to play, because apart from the fact that he felt he was way too old for it, which he was.
He was at least 20 years.
It's not a good role. It's simply not a good role, and he knew it. But basically, they talked him into it. Yes.
But this is the only way to save a role like that.
And the follow-up series they did in the 90s, Scarlet.
Yeah, Scarlet.
And they they bring these characters back, and of course it's that much later they can't have, and Leslie Howard died in World War II, so that's not helpful anyway. So they had to cast somebody for Ashley Wilkes, and this guy was, I mean, sorry for the guy, but he was not good enough to get out of the wet rack.
He was given an impossible job. Only Leslie Howard could have managed.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
and so the casting. That's why this movie is so famous, because the casting was brilliant.
So we are concluding that casting is important.
Yes,
That it is the.
It's not the only important thing, but it's very important.
You have to have a good song, but the singers are pivotal.
Yes, to bring across the message you want to show in your script, in your film, even if the film looks good, if the people who carry it are not good, it's not going to work.
I have one example of that actually. The Anne of Green Gables renditions, there are plenty. There's set in the 1940s, 41, 42 I think they made it, because that was when the last book of Lucy Maud Montgomery came out. So they did the first book and then they did the last book, which is set during her teaching days, because Lucy Maud wrote them out of chronological order. And the book was only filmed ever once, because it's still in copyright.
The one with Anne Shirley.
Yeah, Anne Shirley playing Anne Shirley. The lady changed her name to Anne Shirley because she was so taken by the role. Now, I found her very uninteresting. It were nice little movies, but the actress did not add to the role. The role is an awesome role. You have to kind of like mess it up in order to actually mess it up. She didn't mess it up, but she didn't add to it. And then they cast, in the 1980s, they did the Canadian production, because the movies were American Hollywood productions. They did the Canadian production, television production with Megan Follows, and that was brilliant, brilliant casting. And they also searched quite long for her. And they managed to actually get a girl that was that young. She was something like 16. And
still has some sort of acting chops.
She was amazing. She pulled every single piece of it off that you could possibly piece of. And this actually, after that, you're wondering, can you even do it again? Because it was done so
perfectly.
Yeah, it's like the... how can you? And production was good, although they set it in the wrong time. But I'll chat about that later.
Yeah, and I think was it on film or was it TV only?
This was Canadian television made for TV movies.
Yeah, that means that wasn't on film, and that's a shame then.
But they have remastered for Blu-ray.
Yeah, okay.
So
but
I mean,
still...
they did stuff. But anyway, so then the N with an E, they went a different way to. Tell a modern rendition of the Anne of Green Gables story, and you think, how can they top or even get close to Megan Follows from the 1980s? And they did. They did it differently, and they had an actress that completely, nailed that role like she did. So it was a different Anne, but it was still Anne from the books.
Yeah.
So that I found very interesting to watch.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's the discussion.
Yeah. These are our opinions.
And we're going to stick to them.